In this episode, we're talking about Yoga Nidra with yoga instructor and researcher Erica Sharpe. We cover what it is, how to do it, and how it can help with things like insomnia, PTSD, anxiety, and even phantom limb pain. It's also a practical tool for reaching your goals, changing habits, understanding yourself, and feeling healthier and happier. Let's learn how to relax, sleep, and reprogram your mind by tapping into the power of Yoga Nidra with Dr. Erica Sharpe. I'm going to start really general, and then we're going to dig into this. But what is Yoga Nidra?
Yeah. So Yoga Nidra, it used to be something that I would introduce to people who largely hadn't heard of it. I studied under the student who studied with the creator of Yoga Nidra when I was in India in 2010. And so it was a practice that I was teaching a lot and using a lot. And many people hadn't heard of it, but now I'm pretty sure many people who are listening have heard of it. So it's a little different to introduce now. So it's a practice that many people have heard of. So it's very simple. I think the most important thing to say about it is it's totally passive. It's totally simple. The practitioner of the practice doesn't need any special skills. It's one of those really rare things that you don't have to prepare for going into. You can just let the voice guide you. You don't have to wear anything special. It's not difficult, but it's extremely powerful. And that is very important. So it's practice laying down. It's roughly 30 minutes. It could be 60 minutes. I've made 10-minute versions specifically for, it was a request from a conference from doctors who have no time, but would like to do a little something here and there. And you basically lay down, close your eyes. You're in Shavasana, which is the corpse pose in yoga, just on your back, hands a little away from your body, feet a little apart. So you're not touching anything to anything else, getting distracted. And you listen to a voice. So there's several ways to approach what the practice is. But essentially, you're going back and forth between being awake and being asleep. Many times during the practice, you're kind of on that borderline between being awake and being asleep. And this is kind of where the creator of the practice, Swami Satyananda Saraswati, describes the magic happening. So you're able to, with practice, gain awareness of both your waking state and your sleeping state. And if you continue practicing Yoga Nidra, you may maintain that awareness while you're awake and while you're sleeping throughout your life. That's kind of the ideal. You continue learning about yourself all the time. But most simply, during this 30-minute Yoga Nidra practice, you are the observer of both your waking consciousness and your sleeping consciousness, which, as a scientist, interestingly, you can measure being awake or being asleep using EEG. You cannot easily measure. There's no known way to measure this awareness behind it that's watching everything. So I've been communicating with other people on how to define this state of Yoga Nidra, where you are able to observe what's going on internally and externally while you are waking and sleeping. And this is where the magic happens. So it's a practice that essentially helps to reset your memory. And that's a very easy way to describe it, but there's so many ways to look at it. But it's used for sleep, it's used for anxiety, depression, PTSD, learning, all kinds of things like that. You enter a state of deep relaxation where you're able to really access your subconscious mind.
Yeah, I guess the best way to understand what it's like is to do it. And like you said, it's very, very simple to do. You just kind of lay down on your back and close your eyes and I guess cut off most of your senses, but you're listening, especially to this voice. But it seems like there's this kind of spectrum of consciousness, or a spectrum of wakefulness and sleeping. And I don't know how you look at this whole spectrum. I mean, I guess one extreme, I might be getting this wrong, is we're fully awake and logical and our rational brain's all turned on and the senses are all lit up. And then there's the other end where we're in deep sleep. And then Yoga Nidra falls somewhere in this, and maybe there's multiple spectrums. I don't know. How do you think of this whole thing, and where does Yoga Nidra lie in here?
Yeah, I think we're still trying to define that truly, although many people will describe it many different ways, including the teachers of the practice. Because what's basically known, in the most simple terms, what's basically known is that you do sleep during Yoga Nidra a little bit, and you do stay awake during Yoga Nidra a little bit. Whether it is, I've heard someone say like half of the practice you're awake and half of the practice you're asleep. I've heard someone say half of your brain is awake, half of your brain is asleep. I've heard someone say the state between waking and sleeping, where you're in this alpha brainwave state, is the state that you're in. And in our studies, what we found using EEG polysomnography is during the practice, the person goes through all stages of waking and sleeping throughout the practice. So it kind of hints at all of that. You're awake for part of it, you're asleep for part of it, but it's not so segmented as those previous descriptions. You're like constantly falling asleep and waking up, and you're like oscillating between these states of being awake and being asleep. And you can enter deep sleep in the practice. You can be totally awake, you can be dreaming. But the practice kind of like keeps waking you up, even though it's also putting you to sleep at the same time by doing these very relaxed guided meditations.
So what is the what is the point of yoga nidra? What are we trying to do?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I'll quote the creator of the practice. He says the modern man, so he created it in like the 60s, 70s. So it's actually a relatively new practice, but based on ancient tantric technique called nyasa, which is like the rotation of consciousness, the awareness of different parts of your body, like placing your awareness in each part of your body. And so he expanded on that and created yoga nidra in like the 70s or so. So he's talking about the modern man, saying he doesn't know who he is or where he's going. And that's the root of all of our problems. So through yoga nidra, through becoming fully relaxed mentally, physically, and emotionally, we're able to like cast off our burdens and fully relax, understand who we are. And in his description, as we're able to be aware while we're sleeping, during our dreams, we can understand our memories and our emotions. And during our deep sleep, we can understand our instincts and our drives. And so, in this way, we believe we're aware in our waking life, at least. Whether, nowadays, are we really awake or aware at all? I don't know. But in our sleep, not many people think about what can we learn from our sleep. So he's proposing that with this awareness that's able to be present during both states, you can truly learn about yourself unconsciously, really. It's not like this takes a lot of thinking or reflecting or writing or anything. It's you just learning about yourself, whether you realize it or not. You're able to make better decisions. You're able to walk your path and know where you're going. And I guess self actualization might be an easy word to use to describe the intention of the practice. And as a result, you can help to fix all kinds of other problems you may be having, like sleep or stress or addiction is another big one and a huge issue in our country that I'm currently starting to do some research on. So those are kind of the main points of the practice to kind of set you realign yourself and give you more of a view of who you are and where you're going.
Does it have something to do with like, I mean, there's lots of different words to use to describe this whole thing, but like the conscious and the unconscious, that kind of thing. And it's like we're tapping into it. We're like kind of accessing that developer mode or entering that matrix or something and getting in there, but we're like aware. How does this tie into these ideas of like the conscious and the unconscious and where are we in there? And then by getting in there, what can we do that we can't do like in other, states of wakefulness? Like say we're fully awake, walking around, or we're dreaming, for example.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's a little ironic that you ask it because I was just listening to, so my teacher in India, Vishwash Mandalik, who he studied under the creator, he gave an hour-long lecture. It's on YouTube. And I was just listening to how he described the practice. And I've heard it described different ways. Like you can talk about being awake versus being asleep. And then you're like, I kind of think of it like you're yourself, or in yoga, they call it Atma, your true self. And you're like observing waking and sleeping consciousness. And then he was describing it conscious, being awake, and unconscious, being asleep, but specifically the state of being unconscious. He was relating to like a hard drive, and he was really talking a lot about memory. So he was rooting the kind of mechanism of the practice in memory and how your conscious mind communicates with your unconscious mind in the state of yoga nidra. So he's saying that, and again, like it's mostly theory right now because there's not a lot of true objective research on mechanisms of yoga nidra. We're like trying to get into that a little, but it's challenging with the tools that exist now. But he's saying like when you're awake and you receive like an external signal, he used the example of a bell. Your conscious mind, which again, measuring the mind is another thing that's difficult. There's like the mind and then there's the brain, which you can measure brain waves. But your conscious mind receives a signal, tells your brain what it is, and then your brain takes some action. What he's saying is during yoga nidra, your conscious mind hears something and sends it directly to your unconscious mind, kind of bypassing the physical brain because you're in this relaxed state. You've like disconnected from your other senses. You're just listening. So his description is that you are communicating directly with your subconscious and you're able to sort of, in his words, which a lot of people can relate to now that we're in the computer age, we're like swapping out the memory file. You can like erase negative things and replace them with like new positive things that you'd like to download into your hard drive from that state.
So we have all these memories. Some of them are fears, or they're different habits, or maybe addictions, or just beliefs, or whatever. And of course, they're running in the background while we're awake. And maybe we see them in a different kind of way when we're asleep. Like when we're dreaming, they kind of appear, but it's like we can't really grab them. They're kind of this. And maybe in this mode of yoga nidra, we can be like, it's like a little upgraded version of dreaming almost. Because dream it sounds similar to dream because dreams are also this sort of this access into or seemingly into this unconscious or subconscious or somewhere in there. But it's like hard to do anything in there. So how does this relate to dreams?
That's a good question. I was listening to your recent podcast about lucid dreaming, and I don't want to try to like cross subjects too much because that's not like my area so much. But it is very interesting. So there's a part of yoga nidra where we do visualization, and that begins to feel like you're dreaming. And I kind of hypothesize may produce dreams because you're already in that really relaxed state. They're asking you to visualize things that the person is saying. And the point of that, and also like interestingly, in the beginning of the practice, they say in yoga nidra, you are the creator of the dream. That's like something they say in the beginning of the practice. So like you're having this journey, you're creating it, and you're not fully asleep. You're not fully asleep the whole time. You're like waking up and falling asleep. You are entering dreams, but you're also like coming back out and you're listening externally, which may kind of be a difference between this concept of lucid dreaming and yoga nidra because you are listening, you are aware externally and it's influencing your dream. But then also you're aware internally of your memories, your emotions, and all of this comes together to create your like little experience there. So, something really interesting that one of my teachers described during that visualization part is they often list things that people have seen or done or experienced, kind of like common things, both positive things and negative things. For example, they might say like a coffin beside a grave, or they might say like a sunset, some things that are both generally positive or generally negative, but that a person may have an individual memory or reaction to. And one idea about this is that you're in this super relaxed state. Your body's not moving, you're breathing slowly, you're just visualizing these things as they're said. And so you're recalling a memory. And when you experience that memory from a very relaxed state, the next time it comes up for you in your conscious life, you may recall that memory and have a relaxed response. So in this way, it's used to address PTSD because if you've had a traumatic experience, but then you've recalled it in the state of yoga nidra, perhaps the next time something comes up related to that, you may not have like a PTSD type of response to it because you've experienced the memory in a fully relaxed state.
Yeah, I'm asking you a lot of like kind of hard, almost like philosophical questions, but I'm very curious. Like, it also gets you thinking, like, what's the connection between language, like words, and then images? So, what has this taught you about the connection between words and images, and why do we have more images in the unconscious, and then more? It seems we have more words in the conscious.
Oh, that's an interesting question. I'm a little inclined to say when we're laying there with eyes closed, we're more receptive to those images. Like in our waking life, words probably do bring up images if you let them, but you just there's just so much else going on. That's kind of my thought. But as far as language goes, like we did a focus group where we did yoga nidra for several different groups of people. And I do remember like one person was like really offended that one of the visualizations that was said was mango tree. She's like, I have never seen a mango tree. Like I cannot come up with a visualization of a mango tree. Like this is not working for me. So it is kind of like you have to, in a sense, speak their language or draw on some things that they've experienced. But I think even if not, it doesn't so much matter if someone has seen the mango tree or whatever it is you describe. You're bringing up some kind of memory, some kind of feeling, even if in that case it was like some kind of frustration. You're experiencing it in the state of yoga nidra, so that next time it might come up, you may keep your cool.
Yeah. Well, there's something going on with the senses. Very clearly in yoga nidra, you're turning off a lot of them, it seems, but the audio channels seem to be open. Maybe other ones are too, but then it's like the inner world starts lighting up. So why are we shutting off the senses? What role is that playing in all of this?
Yeah. So that is the limb of yoga called pratyahara. So there's everyone, many people, when they think of yoga, they think about the poses, the different yoga poses. That's asana. That's only one of the 8 different limbs. So the fourth limb after asana is pratyahara, and that's sense withdrawal. So the practice of that, basically, yoga nidra is a good example of it. You remove your awareness from your physical body, from sights, from whatever all the other senses are, and you only, in this case, are only focusing on sound and awareness. And so you're going on this internal journey. And so cutting out the external stimuli and allowing the voice to reach your subconscious and take that journey, they're using pratyahara to achieve that.
Makes you wonder if maybe podcasting and, audiobooks and these things are maybe one reason why people are attracted to them is like it doesn't put you into a yoga nidric state, but it's maybe like something like closer on that side of the spectrum is different than like watching YouTube or Instagram or a movie. I'm not saying it's better or worse, but it's like you can kind of like enter this a little bit more magical land. I can at least when I'm listening to pure audio. So maybe it kind of explains things like that too, and even music, for example, perhaps.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that. That's true. Something that it comes to mind when you say that is I remember reading like you always have these like background thoughts going on in the back of your head. And as a student, I remember reading that like having music playing while you're studying can help to just kind of like entertain those background like thoughts that need somebody to play with, so that you can focus on what you're trying to do. So I found that to be a good case for like background music. Not to say maybe that podcasts are like background noise, but it does take some of the if you're just listening versus watching and listening, you're able to listen while you walk or listen while you fold clothes or whatever.
Why couldn't we do yoga nidra with like tapping into one of the other senses? Say we're putting earplugs in, and instead it's like I don't know. You can imagine different things. They're putting different smells in our nose, or like touching us in different ways, or where our eyes are open, but we're like getting pictures are flashing in front of us, like on a screen or something. I can imagine some of these would be pretty uncomfortable. That's one thing. But what can the audio do that? Why couldn't we do it with these other ones, the other senses?
Oh, I like that question. Making yoga nidra accessible to anyone. Well, it already seems, very accessible, but you're right. You have to be able to hear and you have to be able to understand what language it's said in. I think that the thing about it, why it works with audio, and I don't know. I don't know. That's a really good question if it's possible to do it any other way. But, you can give someone instructions on what to do internally through speaking because we speak to each other. It will be difficult, I think, to try to give instructions through just visuals or just smells. I could go through a little bit like the steps of the practice if you want. So basically, like it starts with thinking about like, we're using sound. So you're instructed to bring your awareness from like your external state. Like we're always aware of like our surroundings mostly. And you want to bring your awareness. We start with like the sense of sound. We're listening to like what sounds can you hear as far away from you as possible. And then you think what sounds can you hear like just outside your building, just in the room that you're in. And then you go in your body, like what sounds do you hear your own breathing? You're like slowly bringing your awareness in to your body. And then you start with, you make an intention. So with every practice, you kind of like set a personal resolve. So you might say something like, one example is I was listening to this, my teacher talk about his experience teaching Yoga Nidra. He had someone with phantom foot pain and he cured it using Yoga Nidra. So he would say, like, I don't have a foot and it doesn't hurt, kind of in his intention, you know. And by doing the practice, you will eventually believe that and it will come true. So setting the intention is very important. You do it at the beginning and you say it again at the end to yourself. Whatever it is that you care about, you can create your own intention and say it. And then after that, you do this rotation of consciousness. You always follow the same pattern. You start with your right hand thumb and you do each finger up the arm, down the body to the foot, big toe down to little toe. And then you start on your left hand, same thing all the way up and down, your whole front, your whole back. And then you do big things together, right arm, both arms, right leg, both legs, whole front, whole back, whole body until you're like feeling your awareness in your whole body. And then you just like leave your awareness of your body. So you kind of start that, and that's the nyasa, that like ancient tantric practice of just like awareness in your body. And then the yoga nidra starts. So you leave your awareness of your physical body and you do some experience of opposites. So this is another really interesting thing. The voice tells you like you're feeling really, really heavy. You're like sinking into the ground. You're so, so heavy. And then you feel that way because you're like very receptive to the things that someone's saying to you, like feel like you're sinking into the ground. And they say you feel very light. You're floating up off of the ground. You're so light. You're like a feather and you feel that way. Although all the whole time you're just laying on your mat. And they'll say pleasure, like imagine your best pleasure you can think of. And pain, like imagine the worst pain you've ever experienced. And you like try to really like feel these things. And I've heard an interesting theory about that too, which is that you're actually kind of training your brain to adjust to these different circumstances or produce these different feelings. So, in theory, if you're in a really cold place, your brain might be able to like produce this feeling of heat so that you're more comfortable. Or if you're in a hot place, you might be able to like produce this feeling of cold so you become more comfortable or like compensate somehow in these opposite situations. And then you go into breathing, just observing your natural breath, and then visualizations, then your resolve, and then it's over. You bring your awareness back to the external environment. So, like, as you can see, guiding it using words is helpful because, like, this is how we're able to kind of like communicate these really subtle changes we're asking a person to make in their own consciousness.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, sound is our main kind of form of communication as humans. I guess we use vision too a little bit, but I mean, most of us, we speak to each other and listen to each other. I guess you could imagine some other creature, like if it's like yoga nidra for dogs or something, it might be slightly different or something. Who knows? But it's interesting because you're saying there's this thing of opposites going on. It also maybe perhaps explains why we're putting all this focus on our body, our, like left thumb, right thumb, all that stuff. And you're like hyper aware of like, oh, I have a back, I have this 3D body, but then it all disappears. Like it becomes unfocused and you're so that's kind of crazy. And it doesn't not just in this, but like in a lot of meditations, you're focused and focused and focused. I'm thinking, why are we focusing in meditation? Isn't that kind of the opposite? Isn't that like kind of unrelaxing? But weirdly, by focusing, which is I think it kind of is a stressful activity in a way, it relaxes us and like everything disappears, and that's beautiful, but also like wow, mysterious.
Right. Like, how does that work? That's a good question. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think as you described it was kind of helping me to understand how that works. Cause, like, in yoga, there's dharana and dhyana. Those are two separate limbs. Dharana is focus and dhyana is meditation. And most people, when they meditate, we focus. So, like, we might do a chant or like say om or look at a candle flame or something. And that's what like many people are capable of, is like focusing on one thing. And so, like, as you describe it, when you're focusing on one thing, like everything else does kind of fade away. You're not worried about all those other millions of things. You're focused on one thing. And then, like in Yoga Nidra, perhaps we're focused on our body and then we leave that awareness and we're able to journey into our like visualizations and our subconscious. Maybe that's kind of the pathway to that Yoga Nidra state, is like you start with focusing on one thing. And then if you can like remove focus from that one thing, then where are you? Then you're in your like internal world.
You said that anybody can. instruct yoga nidra, but it sounds like a difficult thing for me. Like, how do you know what to say? Why is it that anyone could do it?
Oh, sorry. Anybody can do it. Anybody can do it.
Oh, anyone could do it. Okay, I was
Yeah.
like, I don't think anyone
Yeah.
could just instruct that. I
Oh,
mean,
well, I mean, anybody can try. Yeah. Oh, yeah. People do everything. But no, what I meant was anybody can do it. You can lay down and practice it. There is the Yoga Nidra book that you can read from. Surely anybody can read that. You just do it in a relaxed way. I really like that, though. It makes it very accessible. It's scripted, and you can't go too wrong unless your tone is just like, disturbing or something. But, it is accessible in that way.
well, okay, well, what is the teacher or guide saying? What kinds of things are they saying?
Yeah. They're guiding you through each of those steps. So basically, it's kind of like from the teacher standpoint of like you're about to practice yoga nidra, lay down in this way, bring your awareness to this place, to that place, bring your awareness to your breath, and then leave your awareness of your body, leave your awareness of your breath. Repeat mentally these numbers of counting your breath, visualize these things. So it's kind of like commanding you, leading you through this internal practice.
What kinds of objects or symbols or things do they have you visualize, and why certain things rather than others?
Some of them are kind of like stories. Some of them are like lists of things that are seemingly not connected to each other. Like birds flying across the sky, the stars at night, waves on a beach, coffin by a grave, a cross above a church, things that may just like evoke some feeling in you, but not necessarily connected. And then others have kind of a story or a journey that they take you on. Like one that I can remember that is probably interesting is like you are walking and you see a well and you get in a bucket and you lower yourself down into the well and it's like dark, dark. You can't see your hand in front of your face. And like, then you bring yourself back up out of the well and you get out. And it's like this little kind of a adventure that you have to be brave for, even though you're just like totally safe, relaxed on your yoga mat or wherever. And I think the point of these sorts of things is to just like give you an experience that may be worrisome in real life, but in your totally relaxed state, you've done it now and you come out a little bit more brave, a little bit more resilient. Other stories are like a little bit more spiritual. So, like, I like the one, it's like you're walking outside in a garden, you feel like the morning dew on your feet, and you find like a meditation hut and you're curious. So you go inside and you see pictures of great saints or gurus or whatever, and you sit down and you meditate until you find peace, and they kind of like leave you in that meditative state. So there's all kinds of different ones in the Yoga Nidra book, and then there's like different alternatives you can choose. And then for certain conditions, you can create your own. I still feel like it's important to work with someone who's really well versed in creating scripts. Like I'm working on a research study on insomnia and anxiety, and I'm communicating with my teacher in India on like how to write the script because I want to do a good job on that and like make sure that whatever I'm saying to them is going to be really useful. Because of course I could come up with something like you're sleeping so soundly in your bed, and but I want to like make sure that I'm in line with the types of visualizations that are needed to accomplish improving someone's sleep. So I think while you can write specific scripts for specific conditions, there's still some like skill involved in that and like understanding what you're trying to do to that person in that really delicate state.
It's interesting because these scripts are written for not like one specific person. They're working on humans in general, which is kind of curious because like each of us has our own sort of specific, seemingly specific traumas and I mean, kind of unique set of fears, etc., and memories, especially. So it's kind of interesting how these scripts work on all of us, yet it seems like all of our experiences and memories are different.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that observation. So I'll start with yoga as a whole, like living like a yogic lifestyle, eating a certain way, doing asana practice and breathing practice as a whole will make any person healthier and will like keep disease away, whatever disease that might be, or may help to cure, treat, or manage other diseases you might encounter or already have. And I think, and I was kind of taught doing that holistic practice for overall good health and wellness is like really important because you may fend off things you never knew were coming, or you may treat things you never knew you had. And like this kind of like holistic practice, I think is really important. And so I carry that belief into my yoga nidra teaching where I really like these general scripts where like anyone can do them. Like I teach actually yoga nidra class through my university at SUNY Canton. And we're just doing the general scripts, but I've had students, say like their sleep's getting better. I've asked about sleep and anxiety because that's what I'm researching. So I've heard those things, but I've heard about depression. I've heard about blood pressure. I've heard about specifically like PTSD from 3 students. They're like, I used to get really badly triggered when I was driving, but after doing yoga nidra, it's like not happening anymore. So like these very general scripts can keep troubles away from you that you didn't know you were going to have, or can heal things that you were not necessarily setting out to heal. So I really like these general things. But yeah, on the same token, if someone has a particular problem, the script can be crafted to like target that specific thing.
Yeah, because I'm tempted to be like, "Ooh, I wanna make my own little script for me based on, the things that."
Yeah, that's it. That's interesting to think of like making your own because you can think about what you need and like what intentions you want to set. I've only kind of recently started exploring that.
Yeah, but I mean, this is, like, kind of really advanced stuff. It sort of reminds me of there's that story, I don't know if it's true or not, but, like, Thomas Edison would have a nap with, like, a steel ball or something in his hand, and he would do this to sort of solve problems and enter some sort of more creative state, and then the ball would fall to the ground, and he'd wake up, so he wouldn't fall asleep, but he'd get close to the edge, and that's sort of what you're doing in Yoga Nidra too, like, in this book you shared with me, it keeps saying again and again, "Do not go to sleep, do not go to sleep," but kinda get close to it, so, it seems like it's something, also like a tool into creativity and problem solving as well.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, that's a really good way to kinda describe the state that you're trying to reach. Because, yeah, this alpha brainwave state, theta brainwave state, where you're like between being awake, which is like faster beta brainwaves, and being asleep, which like deeper sleep is delta brainwaves. Those like alpha theta states are described as the states where like creativity and meditation happen. So it makes sense that people are having ideas when they're there. And I like in the book it talks about different scientists who have woken up with a new idea, like the guy who like found the benzene ring or whatever, like, thought of it in his sleep. And it's like your brain is making connections while you're sleeping, and if you can somehow harness that, that can be really inventive.
Yeah, but even before or beyond, creativity, the most obvious way to use this is for actual relaxation, because there's all these ways that we supposedly relax, or we're told that are relaxing, and actually these activities, I mean, you could name a lot of them. I mean, of course, watching TV is not relaxing, but a lot of things that actually seem relaxing aren't even relaxing, so maybe you could talk about some of these, sort of pseudo things disguising themselves as relaxing, activities, but how maybe, a much simpler way is just to do yoga nidra. You'll actually relax.
Right, so in the beginning of the book, he kind of, nods to that where, like, we think we're relaxing when we're sitting down. Like, yes, our body's still, but we may not be relaxed, and he goes on to say that, like, when we fall asleep, it's a necessity. We will sleep eventually, like, our body will fall asleep because it needs it, but we may very well be hanging on to all of the stresses that we had before we fell asleep, and they're still gonna be there when you wake up. So, like, the practice of yoga nidra, he calls it sleep after throwing off the burdens. So you release physical tension, you release emotional tension, you release mental tensions, just like the threefold tensions that he talks about, and then you are, like, sleeping, yogic sleeping. So it's sleep after throwing off the burden. So he considers that to be like complete relaxation, like actual relaxation. Whereas many of us will sit there and stare at our phone for a while and like, yes, we're getting some like sedentary time and like we're not doing other tasks, but we're also not dealing with anything else that's stressing us. So we're not dealing with any of those actual tensions that we're holding. So we trick ourselves into thinking we're relaxing when we're often not.
Yeah, it's said that like I still can't make sense of this. Where it's like, oh, 1 hour of yoga nidra equals like, I don't know, 4 hours of sleep, and well, I don't know how you calculate that anyway. But apparently, I've heard this again and again. So how is that possible? What is going on?
Yeah, that's like a statement, and I like to say it too, like, who knows if that's true? It definitely hasn't been, like, proven, and I'm not really sure. I would love to try to explore what that could mean and how we could quantify that because I am doing sleep research, like how we can improve sleep using yoga nidra. So, like, I would love to put my head together with somebody who's like a sleep scientist and what outcomes. What could you measure to see how efficient your sleep was? Like, there's a measure of restfulness, but it's like you ask person, like, how rested do you feel? It's like very subjective. I mean, if there was some kind of like biomarker that you could measure that's produced or gotten rid of during sleep, like if we could measure whether that changes more during yoga nidra per hour, than sleeping, or if it will be really interesting if you could like objectively measure that. It has not been done. But for sure you wake up from yoga nidra feeling really refreshed. Maybe about as refreshed as sleeping for half a night, but it's hard to say. It's like very subjective.
And I guess if you zoom out and look at the overall picture, like you were saying, it improves sleep for a lot of people with insomnia or just that they couldn't sleep, or I guess you could use it before you go to sleep. So even if the actual activity itself is not like quadruple rejuvenating, it's going to facilitate the actual activity of sleep that you'll do later on. So I guess it is improving your sleep regardless, one way or another.
Right. Yeah, that's the other way to look at it as you're releasing these threefold tensions, you're able to access rest, a state of rest more easily. In our preliminary studies, we found that people say it took less time for them to fall asleep after practicing yoga nidra. I've seen other studies where just like asking about sleep quality, people have said, yeah, my sleep has improved since doing yoga nidra. We did our study like where we measured EEG. We gave people like an hour after the practice to see if they were able if they naturally fell asleep after the practice or if they kind of stayed awake. And we just changed the script a little bit, working with my teacher, like try to figure out how delicately to leave them, but without like leaving them too far out. So he said it can be dangerous to like wake someone up in the middle of yoga nidra because they're just like out there, like disconnected from things, and you don't want to leave someone there. But if as long as you bring them back to their body and then say how we ended it was like yoga nidra is complete, you may let your mind go. That's like how we said it. Because we didn't want to tell them to fall asleep because if someone has trouble sleeping, it could cause anxiety to like command them to sleep. So we just brought them back to their body and said, yoga nidra is complete. You can let your mind go. And then like a lot of them were able to just roll over and fall asleep. But the usual practice is yoga nidra is complete, roll over to your side and sit up. And then you do like wake up feeling like, oh, like what happened? I feel like amazing, you know? But you don't want to feel like that right before you go to sleep. So you have to be careful. If you do yoga nidra, that wakes you back up right before you go to sleep. It may actually be harder to just like then go to bed. So that's something we're interested in studying too, is like what time of day is best to practice.
Yeah. Yeah, what is the best time of day to practice? Like you said, you could if you're like really careful or good at it, maybe you can do it before you go to sleep, but there's risks involved with that. The morning seems to be a pretty safe space. I mean, what can go wrong in the morning? But yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. I think really any time is good. And just if you do it before bed, just you can use well, our recording is made for before sleep. There may be other ones that just like don't specifically wake you up. Ours is on YouTube. I can send you the link. We used it for our sleep study. But when I was at the ashram, we would do it like mid morning or so, like 10 a.m. or something. Like we'd have breakfast, do a yoga thing. Well, the other way around, yoga breakfast, and then yoga nidra. And so it wasn't like directly interfering with sleep or anything. But yeah, late morning, early afternoon, anything like that. I think any time of day. I was telling you about the phantom foot thing. I really liked that story. He said he created a specific practice for this person who had lost a foot and was having like phantom pain in his foot. And basically to like get the person to understand on a subconscious level, like that's not there, it's not hurting you. He was having them do yoga nidra like 7 times a day, the same practice. Like anytime he sat down or laid down, just like do yoga nidra. And after 2 days, he was saying that he wasn't having the pain like during yoga nidra, but then it took him like 2 weeks of just like tons of yoga nidra every day. And then finally he was able to not have that phantom pain anymore. So there's all kinds of different ways to like use it once a week or like 10 times a day.
Yeah, but this is also kind of one of the challenges of it. It's like you gotta set aside this time to lay down and play this, audio or go to the class or whatever. It's like I think this is like that's one reason big reason why a lot of people don't do it. But I wonder if there's like, I know you're not gonna get 100% of the benefits, but are there sort of like weird little bite-sized sort of, yoga nidra like snacks that we can kind of just toss in like for, I don't know, as short as possible, like a minute or something? Like, it's not yoga nidra, but it's like a little, kind of like has that flavor that's gonna give you some of that. Is there anything like that that you have?
Yeah. I totally understand like that. Yeah, because so we're studying it and it's 30 minutes. And on one hand, you're like, yeah, everybody has 30 minutes. But yeah, how many 30-minute chunks are we all asked to do for like a million things every day? Nobody really has 30 minutes, including myself. So, like, we did make a 10-minute version, and I find myself using that one, now and then. It's because you kind of do have 10 minutes. Can't argue too much with 10 minutes. There's even a chair yoga nidra that I made that's 10 minutes long. You can do it in your chair. And like after I do yoga, and I have the recording on my phone, and it's usually somewhere near me. I still sometimes, well, oftentimes don't wanna bother turning it on because I'm already in, like, a relaxed state. I just guide myself through a quick yoga nidra, like, very quickly, like, in Shavasana. I make sure, like, I touch on all the steps. So, like, awareness comes in, I say a resolve, I do, like, the body scan with the up the arm, down the arm, all the in the order. The opposites, I count breaths backwards from, like, 11 or so, and then do like a little visualization. Like I like to do the garden one. I'm just like really peaceful, walking through the garden and then say your resolve and then get up. So like that probably takes me a minute and I do find it relaxing. It's not as powerful as a 30-minute practice, that's for sure. But if I'm going to do nothing or if I'm going to do that, I'll do that, little 1 minute thing. Yeah, it is hard. Yeah.
And another stumbling block might be too is like you're mentioning this shavasana, like laying on our back. It's not something we normally do throughout the day, except for when we go to sleep. There might be a nap here or there. I know it's probably not ideal, but can we do this like sitting up or I don't think we could do it walking, but we could do it standing, perhaps. I don't know how far can we stretch the posture?
Right. Can you do it while multitasking? Mm.
Can we do this while watching TV?
Yeah,
No.
that's just how it goes. You can do it sitting. So I recorded like a 10-minute sitting one. It's just recommended to leave out like the body scan because you're not able to like I think that they left out one part when you're sitting. This is like actually the recommendation from the creator. I think it's the body scan you leave out because you're not able to just like fully relax into the floor. You're still like holding yourself up a little bit. And so there's a sitting one. But yeah, no, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it while operating a vehicle. And actually that's dangerous because you can get to them on YouTube. Like, yeah, I wouldn't do that because you really want to get, you're not going to get, you're not going to get into this state of yoga nidra if you're doing something else or, walking or whatever. Like you really want to try to get the most fruit from it possible. So like let yourself lay down, close your eyes and like get deep.
It reminds me of there's some people like it's like their unconscious has sort of become their normal state. I guess we might call these people like they have mental illness or something, perhaps. Like my brother. And then there's also this quote. I have a bunch of quotes from that book. There's one where he talks about this. Of course, the author is not a psychiatrist, but I mean, he talks about madness or psychosis and mania, and he says, "I consider madness a spiritual experience which man has not been able to handle. In India, there have been many great yogis who lived like madmen, and there were also such yogis in Greece. What is the difference between a yogi and a madman? That's the question, maybe. What is the difference between a yogi and a madman? His answer is a yogi is able to handle his experiences, and a madman generally ends up in a lunatic asylum. Yeah. So how do we handle these experiences? It feels like they're close to something like they could trigger mania or psychosis, or maybe they're just close to that. Just like dreams are maybe like a weird, form of psychosis or something. But how do we handle these so we don't end up in the hospital?
Right. That's a very good question. I mean, I don't think most people are at risk of like psychosis from the practice. And just trying to think like what he must be getting at saying that like a yogi can handle that experience. I don't know firsthand, so it's really hard to just like say. But I think what he might be saying is like this concept of being the observer. Because there's in yoga, you try to reach the state of like you're observing your body, you're observing your thoughts. Like I really like the visual of a cloud going across a blue sky or a ripple going across the water, and they'll both pass. You don't have to grab onto them or follow them, and so it's like taking on this kind of like observer role. And it's harder to do that when you're disturbed in any way. It's harder to not get into it and like get all, active about it. But like if you can observe something, maybe that's kind of what he's talking about as far as the yogi handling it.
But I like the idea of the unconscious, like, kinda waking up in our life and, like, it's coming out, but, like, we still need that kind of parent or, the person to kinda guide it along, and maybe that could be a difference too, is, like, you're kind of waking up this unconscious, but if you don't tame it a little bit or kind of, guide it along with your logical, rational mind, maybe it'll just kind of break loose and you'll become like, Mr. Hyde or Voldemort or something. It's a beautiful idea of like we're dancing between the kind of like good and bad or light and dark or like the unconscious and the conscious, but we need both sides. And Yoga Nidra teaches us how to kind of be there and see and kind of almost like befriend and love our unconscious, but not give it complete control, just like a parent or a dog owner won't give their child or the dog complete control, but you're like loving it and being there with it. It's like, ooh, it's like a nicer kind of relationship and you kind of feel more complete. But there's risks if you just let the dog do whatever it wants, perhaps. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm getting at, I guess.
Right. I like that. Yeah, I like that. Like I'm thinking as far as the part where you may be toying with something a little dangerous is like the visualizations because you might bring up something for someone that is upsetting, but from the state of yoga nidra where they are like you get them relaxed first. So like whatever comes up in their mind, hopefully it's going to go by like a cloud in the sky, and they will observe it and be present for it. And then like in theory, it's not going to come out in your daily life and like make you Dr. Jekyll or whatever, whichever is the bad one. But you'll be able to like say like, "Hello, I see you there. I'm comfortable with you now, I'm the observer."
It might explain nightmares too, because that's sort of what's going on with dreams and nightmares too, is like our body's like relaxed, we're actually asleep, and I don't think we're pumping out things like adrenaline and cortisol and stuff at this time. Yet we do have nightmares and we're able to handle them. It's not like we're actually getting attacked by these horrible things. Actually, nightmares can be very horrible. If that's actually happened, that'd be traumatizing. But the nightmares are not really traumatizing. We kind of just watch them and get over them. So maybe it's sort of like that. You're almost like having a little nightmare and just but you're more aware of it. So maybe then you're even beyond nightmares, you're able to kind of like they're gonna help you, move past these fears and traumas. But nightmares help too, but like they're kind of like they're just plain scary and you're like, I don't know what to do with that. Forget about it. With yoga nidra, you might be like, oh, okay, I see what's going on.
Right. Yeah, dreams are really interesting. That's another like path I'd like to go down of research is understanding how those work. I was communicating with a researcher who focused on nightmares years ago and he had surveys, about them, try to like understand what was happening. And I think the difference between like experiencing a nightmare and experiencing something that comes up for you in yoga nidra is like they say, you're the creator of the dream in yoga nidra. So you're there and you can just get out of it if you want to, you know, and you're also like relaxed and it's a little different. I wonder if nightmares can happen also because you may be going to sleep with some stresses as well. You're not like in a blissful, relaxed state all the time when you're sleeping. You carry some of that stress with you. Whereas in theory, in yoga nidra, you are like relaxed, truly.
Yeah, or maybe you went to bed with, like, just actual stressful things in your system, like maybe you had too much caffeine or yeah, you'd had a stressful day or you put in some stressful substances or you're in a stressful environment, like you're sleeping in a noisy neighborhood or something. So it does get you thinking too, like, are there sort of ideal conditions, like, in terms of, like, lighting and food and other things, overall environment and conditions, to help prep us and make yoga nidra a bit easier?
I could say all kinds of things, but I think it's less helpful sometimes when you put restrictions on practices, I could say all kinds of things, turn out all the lights, put a cover over your eyes, only eat vegetables that day. You don't have to, like, it'll be helpful. It will be helpful no matter what. And then you can add to that all other kinds of things that could help you on your journey too. But like we were saying, like the biggest challenge with accessing this is just doing it like we don't have 30 minutes. Everybody is so busy. So like taking away as many barriers as possible to doing the practice, I think is like step one because we're all kind of in this super fast paced society.
Right. Now I'm trying to bring on more restrictions. You're like, "Oh, I have 30 minutes now. I've got a little futon to lay down on. Ah, but there's the light's not right. Oh, I ate that carrot earlier. I guess this tomorrow. I guess I can't do it. Maybe next time." Has this changed the way you sense the world? Of course, we're going back to the whole opposites thing, but like you're turning off a lot of your senses, vision, etc. during yoga nidra, but then of course you're awake a lot of your life. Has this changed like the vividness or the awareness of like your sensory experience?
I don't think I don't think so. I think perhaps I've observed the effects of just feeling like I know kind of my self and I have like comfort in myself and my direction. And like, admittedly, I'm not practicing it every day. I wish I could, or even every week, but I do aim to do yoga like several times a week. And like I said, I'll do like a brief yoga nidra afterwards. At the ashram, we were doing yoga nidra more frequently. And I did notice that dreams were affected. There was a lot of like vivid dreams that I like to like write about after. But I think that also goes hand in hand with like they were describing kind of like the detoxification that happens just from like changing the types of food you're eating and doing more of those asanas and breathing and stuff. So that could be linked to all kinds of things. But I think overall kind of being in touch with like your self and not, like I really like the visualization of I don't know if you've heard this before, but like in yoga, you are like in control of your five senses. You are driving your own chariot with five horses that are the five senses and you tell them where to go instead of like five like misbehaved horses that are like, I see that over there, I hear this over here, I smell this over here, and you're like getting yanked around by them. So like with practice, you are like driving the chariot of your five senses.
Maybe it's more like the way you think, the beliefs and the ideas and things that are kind of controlling you and moving you around in the world. Because you say we're kind of going into that kind of developer mode or something where we're, changing the memories and stuff, swapping out the files and things. So how has it changed your life in general, or the way you live in general? Maybe it's not your way you're seeing or hearing or something, but it's like the things you do or the things you don't do, or the way you communicate, or I don't know, anything really.
It's harder to answer questions about yourself than it is to answer kind of like in theory what you think.
Or in general, like what are some things you've noticed? I'll just scrap this. I'll scrap this question. It's fine. Yeah.
No, no. It's a good question. I think I have to kind of take it with the practice of yoga as a whole. So I can go back to like when I started doing yoga, definitely my whole life changed. So like that is a definite turning point, like change in life. And yoga nidra has been part of that. So it's hard to attribute like did my entire life change from like this or that.
Okay. Well, we could talk about yoga. Well, yoga in general. How did yoga in general change the way you perceive? I don't mean just perceive like with your senses, but overall perception and action.
Yeah, yoga for me, I started it when I was in high school, and it was the first thing that was not high pressure that I felt in my life. I think I was like in 10th grade and I played a sport and I was in like all AP classes, and there was just all these things that are like super demanding and they want you to be better and better and all kinds of self judgment and stuff. And then I went to a yoga class and it was like their goal was self acceptance. I'm like, "What?" You're just, like, telling me to, like, accept everything. So that just changed just my whole, like, outlook. I just loved that. It just felt so warm and cushy, and I needed that. So that just really changed just adopting that outlook, changed how I did everything, and it's not like I became less successful. I actually think I became more effective and more focused and more, like, capable because as I was coming from a place of like acceptance rather than all this high demand kind of way of doing things that I think the West is really good at.
Are there other yoga practices that are, kind of in the realm of yoga nidra? They're a little different, but they do some of the same similar things that might be kind of fun to explore for people who are interested in that this overall, general landscape? Like other kinds of meditations, for example?
There are different ways of meditating. I would say that they're pretty different though. Like I described like Omkar chanting, the woman that I learned that from, she could talk to you for 3 hours about Omkar chanting. Like she is very, very passionate about that. But no, I think Yoga Nidra is very unique. People have tried to compare it to like hypnosis, although, and I'm no expert in hypnosis, but the difference that I've heard pointed out is that in Yoga Nidra, you're still in control of your brain, whereas in hypnosis, somehow they turn off some part of your brain that allows you to like be in control. So there are two; those are two very different practices. Although, like in some sense, you may relate them. Yeah. Aside from that, I think Yoga Nidra is pretty unique.
Well, that's good. It highlights the specialness of it, and like, oh, yoga nidra is yoga nidra, and this is it brings us into a special space that might be hard to access otherwise. So that's probably better. And like you said, we don't need too many extra things to do. We already got enough 30-minute slots to fill. Um, I think another reason why yoga nidra has become popular the past few years is of course because Andrew Huberman has been promoting it, but he's been calling it something else, non-sleep deep rest, which I actually find confusing now because I'm like, I want to be like, what is the difference between non-sleep deep rest, NSDR, and yoga nidra? Well, why do we need two words? What are your thoughts on and maybe it is kind of make more sense. Like if you don't know anything about it and you hear non-sleep deep rest and you hear yoga nidra, one is more like intuitively like, oh, I think might know what that means. But now we have two terms, and I'm a bit confused. How do you? What is NSDR?
Yeah, I have all kinds of thoughts about that. I'll try to keep it like brief. On one hand, I think he's being really entrepreneurially savvy in the sense that like he knows if he makes an acronym, just like they did with MBSR, mindfulness based stress reduction, it'll catch on and he'll like make some money off of it. That's how I'm reading that. But he did that like he lumped together yoga nidra and hypnosis as like two NSDR practices, and they're not like each other. And I don't really think that's appropriate. Also, you do sleep during yoga nidra, so it's not non-sleep. It is a sleep. You do sleep. You sleep for like half of it. And then he spent kind of a long time. Well, he started this in 2017 or so, aligning his acronym with yoga nidra. So he would always be saying like yoga nidra, blah, 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 NSDR, saying them interchangeably. And then people started labeling their yoga nidra practices as NSDR. So it was like catching on. Seemingly, he kind of calculated, okay, now I can make my own recording of NSDR and people will just like follow me like a guru of some sort and buy my products. So I feel that it's kind of playing the long game on strategy. Like if you've listened to the NSDR, it's 10 minutes. It's not yoga nidra. He does some breath guidance and some body scanning and makes sure to advertise his products during it. So I just find it very kind of disrespectful to the yogic tradition. He's not using the word yoga, but he's claiming to teach it, but also really harmful to people seeking a practice that's going to help them. So he's now taken yoga nidra and changed it into something that's not yoga nidra. And people go looking for yoga nidra, which truly can help them, and they find this NSDR thing that's different. So I think he's doing a disservice while also making tons of money off of it. That's my take on it.
Oh, well, yeah, thank you for I was not even gonna ask the question because part of me was just almost assuming, NSDR is yoga nidra, it's just another word, but no, you've shown me, oh, no, there's actually some dangers involved in equating the two of them, because then you'll go searching for yoga nidra, but be like, I'll just type in NSDR. It's fewer letters and whatever, and Andrew Huberman talked about it, so, must be right. But you mentioned he puts an advertisements in the middle of it. If this is in sort of the realm of hypnosis, then that's like really scary. Like, are you trying to get me more like? You're trying to put me in a state to buy your products, and then you're just gonna slip those things in right there.
Well, yeah, he does it in the beginning and at the end. Yeah. So it's like in place of the resolve, he's like, "Have you tried this product? Now breathe deeply." Yeah. I've listened to 1 or 2, but that was my comment about it.
And speaking of the resolve, that's another hard part for me too, because I'm like, I don't know. I have to think of something. Like, what am I? What is the resolve, and how do we think of or come up with or find resolves, and why are they important?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good question. It's supposed to come naturally. It's supposed to be simple and clear. Kinda try to use powerful language. Like, I might say, like, "I'm healthy and strong." Like, if I can't think of anything, something just kind of, like, positive that might be powerful. Or if there's something you're working on, like I keep bringing it up, like, "I don't have a left foot and it doesn't hurt," about the guy with phantom foot pain. Or, like, "I sleep peacefully every night," like, if you have insomnia, something like that. But we work on our research with, a psychiatrist who really took to this concept of making the resolve, and he was pointing out, kinda like you're saying, there's this, like, dark and light of all things, and in yoga, there's also something called left hand tantra where you can, like, use all these practices for bad purposes. You have to be kinda careful what you're doing. But he was pointing out you wouldn't wanna let, like, a bank robber make a resolve to be better at robbing banks, like, for example. So, like, you have to be careful about what kind of resolve you're making, and in fact, you might want someone to help you, like, come up with a good one. He also said, like, don't make it so grandiose that it's impossible and you're not gonna, like, see that change come. You wanna make it something somewhat attainable that you could grasp. So, like, not to overcomplicate it, but it should be something that kind of comes up for you naturally or that you could think ahead of time about what it is that you'd like kind of intention you'd like to set.
Yeah, something positive, something you kind of would like to change, but also something you could believe too. Well, one beautiful thing too about, yoga nidra, just like sleep, is like we're completely like, well, I don't know, I haven't really done much yoga nidra. Maybe I haven't even done it properly at all. Maybe I just did NSDR. But is you're certainly when we're dreaming, we're believing what we're seeing and what's going on. Like, this is real. Yeah, this is true. So I guess yoga nidra is putting us in somewhere in such a state like that, where like a child or whatever, maybe it's those theta brainwaves or whatever, but we're kind of like in this more programmable, more self-programming, I guess. But we can actually believe it. So yeah, it makes sense why you have this resolve too. It's sort of like the a better version of those advertisements. You think about it in the beginning, maybe you don't believe it in the beginning, but then you enter this state where your brain's like all like ready to believe, like the way we are when we're dreaming or we're a child or something. And then at the end you say it again, and then it's like, oh, maybe I do believe it now. Maybe it is true.
Right. Right. That's kind of the idea is like you're as it was described by my teacher, and who knows what's happening. We're like trying to start investigating it, like what's happening in your brain, but it's like you're bypassing the physical brain and just going like directly to your subconscious. The message that you're getting is like going to your subconscious mind and like directly resetting your memory or resetting your view of your experiences.
I especially love this too, because now it feels like we really do have 24 hours a day, you know, of life. Before you're like, sleep is sleep and wake is wake, and even daydreaming, I'm doing nothing. But now when we're doing nothing, it doesn't feel like we're doing nothing anymore. It feels like we're actually maybe living even more. So it's like it almost like gives us more life. That's what I love about this most.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Sleep is amazing. Like the more you learn about what's going on when you're sleeping, it is amazing and so interesting. It's important to sleep enough. Like I think you do most of your dreaming during like your last 2 hours of sleep. So many people are like unable to dream because they have to get up too early. Like the times when I'm able to sleep in and I just have all kinds of dreams, those are like the best.
If people want to find some of these NSDR scripts, or they want to do NSDR, where do they go? I know you can get the recordings. There's also like live. I don't know if it's a class or what, but maybe you can describe it how we do this.
Yeah. Well, you said NSDR, but I know you meant yoga nidra.
Oh my god! See, I've been programmed. He's programmed me. I've been hacked. I've been hacked by Huberman. Oh no.
I always say NDSR because mindfulness based stress reduction is MBSR. So I always mix it up and I put SR at the end. Yeah, they're really two like different things. So yoga nidra, I mean, honestly, that's a challenge that I'm trying to solve right now. As a researcher, I've been going to these trainings recently that are hosted by National Institute on Drug Abuse. So it's a little bit of a winding story, but they're trying to come up with ways to address substance use disorder in our country. It's a huge, huge problem. And one of the solutions that I'm proposing that also kind of solves this issue of authenticity of practices is coming up with some way of presenting clinically studied practices to people, like on a platform, like this is this thing and you know it's authentic and you can try it here, whether it's an app or something like that. Because YouTube is like what we have right now, and it is such a mess of like everything, and anybody can call anything anything. And so it is harder now than it used to be to find an authentic yoga nidra practice. Like when I first started doing the research on it was about 2016, 2017. And like I'd type yoga nidra and I'd see recordings from India, like of yoga nidra from like the yoga nidra. And now you type yoga nidra and there's just like a million choices. And most people wouldn't know what they're getting. Um, not to not to turn it into selling my stuff, but I do have a channel where I recorded the scripts from this book, the Yoga Nidra book that we use for our research studies. I can send you that. What we are talking about doing for like the upcoming study is actually just texting somebody the audio file, because then they can use it on their phone and you don't have all these issues of like autoplay on YouTube, like coming up with something else after and disturbing you, or like ads coming up. And you can also use it. Like I did yoga nidra on the airplane a couple weeks ago and I used my audio file on my phone because I couldn't get on the internet for some reason. So I was like, I'll just open this thing because I can do it. It's yoga nidra on my phone. I'm like, maybe we should do that for our studies because then people don't have to like sign on to whatever webpage. So we might be doing it that way.
And you could use the same recording over and over again, right?
Yeah. Like we made about 15 different recordings.
Okay, cool. Do you have a website, or how do we learn more from what you're doing, or how do people connect with you?
My email is esharpe, so ESHARPE at NUNM.edu. And yeah, I have a YouTube channel. A website would probably be better, but since I teach yoga through my university, I've been putting the videos on there and I've been putting our yoga nidra videos too. So it's just my name, Erica Sharpe.
And I didn't ask about your studies. You mentioned them a few times, but what are some of the results of some of the studies that you did on this?
Yeah. So we've been trying to study yoga nidra for insomnia and anxiety. We started with a qualitative study, just running some focus groups. Like we did 5 different focus groups where people would come, try the practice, and then sit around and like answer some questions afterwards. Mostly we found that they found it to be, and it's like when you're studying yoga, especially as a yoga teacher, like nothing that we find is surprising to me because like I'm just interested in, well, I'm supposed to not be biased, but we're trying to discover whether yoga is effective, but I believe that it's very useful as a yoga teacher. So I'm not always surprised when I hear that, oh, they found this to be extremely relaxing and all that. But we found that people were able to fall asleep during it. Some interesting feedback was I did one of the focus groups in a jail, and one of the people there had some kind of like back surgery. She had like some kind of metal in her spine or something she was describing. She hadn't been able to sleep since she got to the jail, she said, because she was just, obviously, that's a traumatic time. But she was able to sleep during the practice, and she said she wasn't feeling pain and she felt very relaxed. So that was a really interesting kind of anecdotal feedback about yoga nidra and pain. So that we were kind of interested in looking at that more closely. And then after we did the focus groups, we called it a sleep lab study. So we used EEG and set up sleep montage. So they had their sensors on their head and we sent the data away to get analyzed for what was happening with their sleep. So we published that, and in the supplementary information, you can see like the actual sleep architecture. So like when they were awake, when they were asleep, when they were dreaming, all throughout the practice. And it was just 8 people. So really just like a pilot study. So we're not able to draw conclusions on, like, I was really interested to know, like during visualizations, for example, do people mostly start dreaming at that point, but there were so few people. There's no clear trends yet, but with a larger sample, maybe we could see something like that. But what we did find, which is valuable, is that during the practice, people are being awake, being asleep, being awake, being asleep throughout the whole thing, sleeping for like about 30 to 40% of the practice, which is in line with what the book says, actually, which I don't know if that's based on EEG measurements or kind of like guessing or what. There have been a lot of really interesting studies in India. They're published in the back of that book, but in the West, we often have to like reproduce studies that were done in India for rigor and, you know, in order to prove anything. And then we did a remote study during the pandemic, in the beginning of the pandemic, where I was teaching a yoga nidra class online. And I just gave them surveys before and after the practice on their anxiety. And we found that for over half of the sample, their anxiety dropped from like above normal levels to like way below normal levels. So this was just like from right before the practice to right after the practice. So that's a pretty good finding. And similar, they said that after the practice, they felt that they slept better the next night. So we've done a lot of like this preliminary setting the stage research, and we're trying to get funding for a larger sample longitudinal study. Also currently working on about to start a study on older adults who are taking medications for sleep and seeing if the practice may help motivate them to take less of their medications.
Yeah, and I guess we've talked about a lot of them, but maybe just to kind of like list them. There's lots of potential benefits of yoga nidra. I can't remember them all, but maybe you can.
Yeah. So it's used traditionally or anecdotally to help with PTSD, to help with stress, anxiety, depression, insomnia, addiction, and like learning and memory. And I'm sure it can benefit all kinds of other stuff, but those are some key uses for it.
Yeah. Are there any you've mentioned this book is called Yoga Nidra. I can't say the author's name, Swami something.
Yeah, Satyananda Saraswati.
Yeah. Aside from that, are there any other and there's your YouTube channel. Are there any other resources that you recommend?
I could direct you to the ashram I studied at, it's called Yoga Vidya Gurukul. They have a good webpage, yogapoint.com. It's just like all things yoga, but it's a good source for like they teach traditional Indian yoga based on like the Hatha Yoga Pradipika and like the original Ashtanga yoga texts. So like very much authentically rooted in traditional Indian yoga. And you can probably learn more about yoga nidra there.
That's good. Yeah, thank you for sharing that book, and thank you for sharing all your ideas today. I was giving you like these kind of unanswerable philosophical questions and things that are like beyond anyone's expertise. But thank you for playing along and teaching me what you do now. It does get me more excited to do yoga nidra. I don't think I'll be able to do it every day, or but I'll do it. Thank you so much, Erica. I hope we can stay in touch.
Cool. Thank you. Lots of fun.